My name is Nancy Thomas. I'm 66 years old, and I live in a simple house in Cedar Grove, North Carolina. I've been a wife, mother, caregiver, I miss you, our child. Today, I'm just an old woman who talks to God while passing the coffee. Have you ever imagined being locked up alive by your own child? No food, no phone, alone in a cabin in the middle of the woods, and still hear from his mouth, "Well, you're going to rot here." Perhaps you are thinking that this is an exaggeration, that no child would be capable of such cruelty. I thought so too. We create, feed, protect. He believes that one day, at the end of the road, he will have the hug back. But it doesn't always have. If you've ever felt forgotten by those you loved the most, or if you've ever wondered how a mother gets to the point of being discarded as a nuisance. So, this story will touch the bottom of your heart. Today, I'm going to tell you everything. How it began, what happened in that icy cabin, and, above all, what he didn't know. Because, no matter how hard he tried to erase me, time was on my side. But, before we dive into the heart of this story, I need you to know one thing. No mother is prepared to hear from her own child the words I heard. "You're going to rot here." That's how he left me, locked in a musty cabin in the mountains, with no food, no phone, no chance to get out. While he and his wife were drinking margaritas in Miami, I struggled with hunger, cold, and the echo of those words that no one should hear from those who put them into the world. But what Brandon didn't know, it's just that in that cabin there was something forgotten, kept there in the basement, and it was with that I was able to send a single message, just one. And after her, Sergio Tapsuna de Gioban, his life was never the same. If my outburst is touching you so far, if you have also felt your heart tight for someone who should take care of you, then stay with me. Leave your like as a silent hug and subscribe to this channel so you don't miss any story like this. Sometimes we just need a safe corner to tell what we experienced. And here, my data much why Sigyor said, I found mine. Thank you for being with me. Now, yes, I can go on. How? I've always liked to wake up early, 5:30 in the morning, when it had you chew data. Every day, the noise of the kettle on the stove, the smell of coffee rising through the kitchen, the birds partying in the backyard. That's how I started my days here in Cedar Grove. The house is simple, but everything in it has a story. The living room rug, for example, I bought in 5 installments with the money I earned washing clothes for the neighbors. The kitchen table was made by my husband. Before leaving, I was widowed at the age of 34. Brandon had only 7 after I buried my husband, a Vietnam veteran. I swore to myself that I would do anything to give our son a dignified life, and I did, mon dear. I sold jewelry door to door. I cleaned the motel bathroom. I sewed it by lamplight. There was a night when I went to sleep with pain in my whole body and fear in my heart. But I never let my boy lack food or affection. I remember Christmas 1998. Well, we didn't have money for the tree, so I cut dry branches and made one with old blinkers. Brandon was so happy that he slept on the couch, hugging the ornaments. He would say, "Mommy, you're magical." And I smiled loud, because for him I was. On Sundays, we went together to the Baptist church. I dressed him in the only dress shirt I had, and he got all silly when the pastors praised him. I've always been very respected here. The sister Idol Hermon, Adam Street, Ounce. That's what they called me. Oh, Honani, Onada, would it senator suit him out? The neighbors admired me. But the truth is, inside, neon young, I just wanted to rest. When Brandon grew up and passed college, it was glory. I sold my engagement ring to pay for his books. I worked twice as hard. Every good note he brought, I stuck on the refrigerator door as if it were a trophy. On graduation day, I was the only mother who arrived alone. I sat in the last row, in a lilac dress, and cried the whole time. Not sadness, of relief. After he graduated, things started to change. First, it was the distance. He got a job in Charlotte, and soon got a girl, Kimberly. When I also to Tom, a polite but cold girl. At first, I thought it was shyness. Today, well, and this and a one, as you know, this should cut, Today I know it was contempt in disguise. He moved into a big apartment now, and promised to come every Sunday to visit me. I started making apple cake on Saturday night, just so he could smell it when he walked in the door. The first 2 Sundays, he came. On the third, now, Neil wasn't. He sent a message saying he was tired. Then, silence. When the neighbors asked, "And Brandon, how are you?" I smiled. Hi. He said he was working hard. Too, that he couldn't come. Nay, I don't know how. That it was a phase. But inside, something already hurt. Because a mother feels. And that's when I started to realize that the time he used to insist on spending with me was now negotiated as an obligation. The calls turned into short messages. The hugs are gone. The excuses were repeated. Now, and I was still there, waiting. There was a day when I spent hours on the balcony, with a small plate of warm cookies. I had made it the way he liked it, with semi-sweet chocolate chips. I saw the car go straight by. It was him. He saw my nod, and they saw him sitting yesterday. And it continued. I went back inside, sat on the couch, and stared at the window. It was on that day that I understood. Sometimes abandonment does not come with shouts. It comes with silence. No, there's a moment in every mother's life when she realizes that the love she gave has become uncomfortable. And it's such a hard feeling. so cold and down that it feels like your chest is going to crack. If you've ever experienced something like this, if you've ever felt ignored by someone you helped create, comments below. He writes, I understand. I've lived it. Oh, it's true. Because there are things that only those who have been through really feel. Even with everything, I said to myself, no, what is going to be that boy again? The one who slept with the tree with dry branches, the one who said I was magical. Mom. But I didn't know that. Down the road, Mom, he would do something so cruel that not even time could erase. Want to know when everything really started to go wrong? It was at a dinner, a simple dinner. A simple dinner. But that changed everything. And I'll tell you, that dinner was supposed to be just a family gathering. I had made a reservation at Cracker Barrel, near my home. Me too, so I wanted a quiet environment with food that reminded me of childhood. It was the only restaurant where Brandon ate potato pancakes as a kid and said it was better than mine, just to tease me. I arrived earlier, as always. I did my hair, put on lavender perfume, then washed it, put on a blue cardigan that he liked. Kimberly arrived first, with that face of someone who is being forced to be there. And Brandon, he arrived late, with his cell phone glued to his ear in a look that no longer looked for me as before. Said, the waiter brought the menus. I tried to start a conversation. No one's you, Val. I talked about the garden, the church, his childhood memories. But to each sentence of mine, he responded with an ahem, without looking up. Nice. Kimberly looked at the clock as if she wanted to get out of there as soon as possible. I ordered coffee for everyone, and that's when she uttered the phrase that, to this day, crosses me today. Your house has a very strong smell of old things. Nancy, now, Brandon feels bad when he comes back from there. She said it as if commenting on the weather. Simple. I do. Still my hand. Cho. Direct. Guilt-free. I froze. I looked at my son, expecting a reaction, a gesture, a defense, but he just sighed and said, Kim, not now. And that hurt more than if he had agreed. It was as if his silence was worse than her attack. I was in shock, but I smiled. I swallowed. I changed the subject. I talked about the carrot cake I made the day before. No one commented. When the bill arrived, he paid quickly and said, One son, Mom, next week, it's tough. Well, talk to each other, okay? And he gave me a kiss on the forehead. No. Kimberly only waved her hand. I returned home in that old car, with the radio muted and my chest tightened. I arrived and went straight to the bathroom. I looked at myself in the mirror. There was something on my face, maybe tiredness, maybe embarrassment, because, for the first time, I felt a declared discomfort. In the following days, I tried to call about 5 times. I went straight to voicemail. His message was always the same. Hi, this is Brandon. Nod. Leave your message. I let it. Always with a firm voice, trying to appear cheerful. Son, I'm kidding. I just called to see if you're okay. I made banana cake. If you want to stop by. But no one showed up, and he didn't even answer. No. Once, I left cookies at the door of their apartment with a little note. Love, Mom. When I returned the next day, the pot was still there, intact, and the rain had already blurred my handwriting. It was there that I understood, knew. It was not a face. It was not a hurry. It was distancing, cold, deliberate. Wow. He was erasing me little by little, and I was letting it, because deep down, I still believed that a mother's love was enough to cure anything. But I was wrong, very wrong. Nils Aditya Untakta, because shortly after, he invited me to rest, and I accepted. Little did I know what that meant. Can you imagine what kind of son sends his own mother to rest? Locked? Ill? Tell you how it happened? Nirgatiao. And why? And what you know? And I remember that Saturday so clearly that it seems like it was yesterday. It was Brandon's birthday. Wow, Natasha. I woke up early, as usual, and went straight to the kitchen. Rib roast with barbecue sauce, browned potatoes in butter, grilled corn, nana no chow, when sitting out, on some carrot at eaten, and, I knew cow. Of course, the peach pie. He always said that no one did it like mine. I spent all day on that stove, taking care of every detail as if it were a feast. I set the table with the placemat that he gave me when I was still in college. I lit the candles. I put the photo of him with the diploma leaning against the toilet in the living room. By 6:30, I was ready, and I sat in the armchair. What? With my blue polka dot dress and my hair tied with a bobby pin, waiting for the sound of the car at the entrance. 7 hours. Nothing. The phone is silent. 7:30. I looked out the window, turned on the garden light for him to see that I was awake. The smell of the food was already starting to cool. The cake was there. Wow. On the table, with the icing shining. 8:30. Called. He called twice and fell. 9:15. My heart was already small, but I still said to myself, he is stuck in traffic. Kimberly got sick, but he didn't come. He didn't even send a message. I stood there, Morny, sitting in the living room, looking at the clock as if waiting for time to return. I went to sleep with the table set. The next day, I woke up to find a short message. I forgot. Mom, Kim was not well. Is that it? No excuses, no voice, no explanation. I read and reread that sentence more than 20 times. I couldn't answer. None. I kept the prime rib in the fridge. The pie was left there, intact, for 2 days. In the third, where one in juice, and a kind calm. I threw everything away. And I cried. I cried like a forgotten girl at the school gate. It was a small, contained cry. Wow, an unforgettable, a noun. One of those that only those who have been very strong understand. At the end of the following week, something inside me screamed louder than shame. I decided to stop by his house. Without warning, I grabbed a jar of fresh cookies and went. The building was new, modern. I pressed the intercom, and Kimberly answered. Her voice froze. Nancy? Come in. When I went upstairs, I knocked 3 light on the door. I was greeted with a fake smile and a perfume that was too strong. I entered, and what I saw made me freeze. On the living room couch, sitting as a bridesmaid, was Kimberly's mother, and I, using my place, the same sofa that Brandon said was ours alone. He came to me with a rehearsed hug. Oh, but his eyes avoided me. We were going to call you, Mom, but it ended up being at the last minute. Lie. I knew it, felt unwell. Kimberly picked up the cookie jar and didn't even look at it. Her mom laughed at some Brandon joke and said, "That boy is a gift, isn't he?" And I was there, like a stranger, down a stove. After a few minutes, Kimberly pulled me aside with a little porcelain smile and said, "Nancy, what about how we need a little more space." Okay. The sentence was suspended in the air like a polite slap. I just shook my head. I didn't cry. I didn't fight. I said goodbye, returned home in silence. And that night, for the first time, I left the porch light off because I understood. They had already found another family, another mother, another story to tell. But what they didn't know, it was that even the most humiliating silence plants something. And the pain I kept quiet on that couch, it was starting to grow inside. And one day, it was going to bloom in the most unexpected way, because the following week, Brandon came back to me, and what he offered me was even worse than oblivion. Want to know what it was? I'll tell you, but prepare the heart. It's been a few weeks since that dinner that never happened. The food went to waste, but the pain, this one, was kept inside, kept in a corner of the heart where only an abandoned mother understands. I had already learned not to wait. I didn't bake cakes anymore. I started watching a circus lecture, nor did I prepare coffee, waiting for the sound of his car. The only thing I did was try to keep going. Until one cloudy afternoon, there was a knock on my door. It was Brandon, alone, without warning, no flowers, no smile. Why? Until not now. I was paralyzed for a few seconds. Surprised? He had never appeared like this again, out of nowhere. Hi, Mom, she said, via smile, as if she were coming to get a forgotten coat. I made room for him to come in. I put water on the fire. Offered tea. He accepted, but did not touch the cup. He sat on the couch as if he were on thorns. And then, without looking directly at me, he said, "Hugh, Mom, we need to talk." My heart froze. He only wore this tone when a bomb came. Me and Kimberly, we have been talking, and we thought maybe it would be good for you to take some time out of town. To rest. Think about you. I was silent, trying to understand what that meant. What do you mean? Out of town? I asked. He scratched his head and replied, "Right. A friend of ours has a cabin in Boone. No, in the mountains. It's empty. It has a fireplace, peace, nature. I thought it would be good for you." For a few days, I held the cup tightly, feeling the heat of the tea, almost burning my skin. "Are you sending me away, Brandon?" He smiled embarrassedly. "Of course not, Mom. It's just a temporary change. You need rest. Of space. Space. That word kept hammering in my head. I knew what it meant. It meant disappear a little. It meant it's getting in the way. And at that moment, I was no longer a mother. I was an old piece of furniture, pushed to the corner of the room because it no longer matched the decor. Wow. But I didn't cry. Oh. I just looked at him and said, "That's right, son. Toil. If you think it will help, now. I will." He breathed a sigh of relief, like someone who got what he wanted. He finished the tea in a hurry, said he would come back on Saturday to take me. Before leaving, I'm not told. He still said, "Hun, it takes little. How? There's already everything there." I was alone in the living room. In your living room? Looking at the space where he was sitting. It seemed that he had never belonged on that couch. It was as if time had ripped off the Brandon I had created and put in place a stranger in a tight suit and an empty heart. I spent the next few days folding clothes that I sewed myself, sorting coats, keeping a picture of him as a child, his face all dirty with chocolate, and my devotional. That's all I was going to take. On Friday night, I left a lasagna ready in the fridge in case he ever decided to show up with nostalgia. And on Saturday, as promised, he arrived. He didn't get out of the car. He stayed in the driver's seat, looking at the clock. I locked the front door, took a deep breath, and got in the car like someone going to a retreat. But deep down, my heart already knew that wasn't a vacation. That was a discard. And look, I'm here, opening my heart, telling my story with all the details, even the ones that still hurt. If you are there listening, feeling something with me, leave a like on this video. Subscribe to the channel. Because I still have a lot of things saved to tell you. Sometimes, we just need someone to listen. The road to Boone was long, surrounded by tall trees and even greater silences. And when we arrived at that cabin, I noticed, I wasn't going to rest. I was being buried alive. Want to know what that place was like? Just wait to hear what I found inside. The road to Boone seemed to have no end. The trees were getting taller, while to more closed, as if the world was shrinking around us. Brandon drove quietly. No music, no conversation. I, I could only hear the rattling of tires on the gravel road and the low hum of the engine. I tried to start a conversation. I commented on the autumn leaves, but he just mumbled a whoa and kept looking ahead, as if carrying a package and not a person. When we finally arrived, the wooden gate was half down, and Jens beyond a house. Well, calling it a cabin would be generous. It was a dark wooden shack, with the windows covered with planks, the roof bent by time, and a musty smell that was already coming from outside. I got out of the car slowly, holding my suitcase with the 2 coats and the photo of my deceased. I looked around. No house nearby. No pulse. Neil. No noise of people. Only the wind cutting down the trees. Brandon opened the front door with an old key and entered first. Here, you will be able to reflect. Mom, it's going to be good for you. His voice sounded so artificial that it gave me a chill. I went in behind him, and the first thing I felt was the icy breath of a place that hasn't seen human warmth for years. The wooden floor creaked. The walls had dark, damp stains, and the light, weak, yellowish, as if even she was afraid to stay there. There was a double bed covered by a thin sheet, a sunken sofa in the corner, and unlit fireplace full of cobwebs. I went to the kitchen. There was no food. There was no water. The faucet released only a wisp of muddy liquid. The refrigerator was turned off, and of course, no phone signal. Neither landline nor cell phone. I took my device, looked at the screen. Why? No service. I tried to walk around the hut, looking for a sign. Nothing. Brandon, impatient, was already waiting at the door. I need to go. Kim called me. It's urgent now. But are you going to leave me here alone? Are you going to leave yet? I asked. I'll begin. My voice trembling. Why? It's only for a few days. Mom, rest. Read his devotional. Out. It will do you good. Trust me. And before I could answer, he closed the door. I heard the sound of the key turning outside. Locked. At first, I thought it was a mistake, that he was going to come back, that he just wanted to give me a scare. But the minutes passed, and the sound of his car disappeared on the road, as if he would never return. I walked around the house in a shadow, trying to understand what had happened. I went to the door. Locked. The windows, attached from the outside with pieces of wood. The hold, closed with padlock. The cold began to hit. I tried to turn on the fireplace, but there was no dry wood. I took the old blanket from the bed and wrapped myself in it. I sat on the couch and stayed there, listening to nothing. Night came quickly. Wow. And with it, sewa, anita, fear, and test, our ines. I didn't know if it was a weekday, if it was raining in Cedar Grove, if my neighbor was still leaving the radio on loud. I just knew that there, in that place, I was no longer a mother. It was no longer people. I was just a nuisance kept away, a weight that he pushed away from his life. And now, I stayed like this for hours, in silence, with my husband's photo in my hands. I looked at that face in uniform, smiling, and said quietly, "Ah, if you're listening to me, help me." And then, meanwhile, not that you'll cut there. In the middle of that icy loneliness, I remembered a detail, a detail that Brandon had completely forgotten, something that was hidden there in the basement. And that's when a spark ignited inside me. Was it possible to get out of there? Did that basement hold more memories? I needed to try before it was too late. No. The first night inside, time did not pass. The cold took over my back, even with the thin blanket I found on the bed. The wood on the floor crackled, as if to complain about my presence. Every noise of the forest outside made my heart leap. But what hurt the most was the silence, a heavy silence. Oh, like that of a badly closed tomb. I got up several times to try to open the door. I hit, pushed, tried to turn the handle hard. It was locked with a chain outside, one of those thick ones from a farm gate. The windows were sealed with nailed boards, rusty nails, old but firm. I'd seal pie, fry. I tried to find something that could loosen the ends, but nothing there fit. Not a fork, not even a screwdriver. I went back to the couch and sat with my hands on my lap and took a deep breath. That's when I put my hand in my coat pocket and found my cell phone. My heart even beat faster. More. But when I pressed the button, nothing. Black screen. Finished. No on. Is. The charger had stayed at home, in the bedroom socket. Wow. I got up, searched the cabin calmly. Loophole. What in Ashton cabin? The kitchen was tiny, with a moldy cabinet. I opened it slowly, and inside there was only a can of beans. One. 2 years ago. I closed it carefully, as if even that was too delicate to bear my disappointment. The next morning, the sun beat down through the cracks in the wood, and for a moment I thought the nightmare was over. But it was enough to try to open the door again to remember where I was. The air was drier, and so was my mouth. What? I went to the bathroom. There was no flush, just a bucket, an old bucket leaning against the corner. It was as if the place had been set up not to last, to be provisional, or worse, to be a prison. I went back to the living room and sat on the edge of the bed. The body was already beginning to weigh down. The head, too. I looked again at my husband's picture, which I had placed on the table, and said quietly, "No, Sue." He knew. Yes, Brandon knew. He hadn't left his cell phone by mistake, not even forgotten food, not to mention water. He locked that door. No, he knew I was going to stay there with nothing. And he went. He went to Miami on vacation. Aboard Joan. That was the time when the penny really dropped. That was no carelessness. It was abandonment. Wow. It was rejection in the cruelest degree. It was the confirmation that I was no longer part of his life. And if you are still here with me, listening to my voice, wow, it is because deep down you also know that there are pains that do not heal with time, only with truth. It stays until the end. Because what happened next? To this day, I find it hard to believe that I lived. On the afternoon of the second day, I heard a noise outside. A truck, maybe a delivery, a hunter, a neighbor. I know. I ran to the door, slammed my hands, shouted, "Noise! Help! Is there anyone there?" But the noise has passed, walked away, and disappeared. Why? I stood with my forehead against the wood for minutes, as if begging for life to go back. My hands were already shaking. The cold was constant. Now, the throat dries up. I knew I couldn't last long without water. I went to the bathroom, filled the bucket with the little that came out of the tap, and let it rest. It is muddy, dirty, and a slam. He said so, but I had no option. I sat down again. I hugged my legs. I closed my eyes, and I repeated to myself, "Wow, you will survive. Nancy, how? You're not going to die here." But I needed something. Give a sign of a way out. It was then that I remembered the old key, the one Brandon's father used to lock the basement when we came here in the 80s. Was it still there? Could it be that that basement, forgotten by everyone, I once Sue, could it be the only chance to escape? The next night was the longest of my life, but when the day dawned, I decided to look for it, and what I found down there. Everything changed. Do you want to know what was in the basement? So prepare your heart, because from here, I was no longer the same. That morning, my body no longer responded properly. My feet were purple from the cold, and my hands were shaking so hard they could barely hold the mug of dirty water I was trying to drink. I crawled into the basement with an old flashlight, praying softly, asking for strength. The wooden staircase creaked with every step, and the smell of moisture seemed to enter through the skin. This place was part of an ancient time. My husband and I used the cabin in the summers, before life got too hard. My eyes searched every corner, looking for anything that could help me, and it was after a pile of moldy boxes that I found the generator, an old, rusty workman, now, but still whole. My heart beat faster. I remembered that Brandon, as a teenager, wore it on camping trips. He himself learned to start by pulling that little rope aside. Underneath the generator, there was a blue plastic box. When I opened it, My hands almost couldn't believe what I saw. Wait till the portable charger he was using, wrapped in a piece of cloth. When Sam down, it was heavy, resistant, wow. And when I pressed the button, you lay down. 3 little green lights came on. Nara, one chowbedishada, the walk oksa. I sat on the dirt floor and cried. Moonlight. I cried like a lost child who finally finds his mother. I had a chance, a single one. Where did you count the daughter? A single one. I turned on my cell phone and connected. Wow, Litsu. The screen lit up, and there, in the palm of my hand, the world came back into existence. But no signal, no network, no Wi-Fi, only the offline, mute, immobile mode. I stood there, one so down, staring at that phone as if facing life, trapped inside a bottle. Not so raised. Where? I climbed carefully back to the living room and sat down by the window. I raised my arm, looking for a corner. There still were you. Now, into a crack. Any place where the signal could enter. Why? But nothing. And that's when I started talking. Talk to God. Talk to myself. Talk to my husband, who has already left. I said, no, I'm here, and I'm still here. Now. Someone needs to know that. Night came again, and with it the sound of branches hitting the window. The wind whistled like an ancient lament. I lay on the couch, wrapped my feet in a torn piece of the blanket, and stared at the ceiling. Every noise was a fright. Every minute seemed like an eternity. At dawn, a loud bang. Ooh! A branch fell on the roof. I screamed, curled up in a corner of the room, hugged my pillow and cried. It was rock bottom, but deep down, the kind of pain that has no name. It was there, curled up like a dry leaf in the corner of the house, that I remembered the words Brandon said to me when I was about 5 years old. He took my face with his little hands and said, Mom, when you get old, I'll take care of you. I promise. And, folks, the promise of a child is something that we engrave in the soul, even when they forget. If you've ever felt this pain, the pain of seeing a promise become a lie, a love turn into silence, comment below. He writes, Mia, I know how it is. I understand you. It's true, because there are pains that we can only bear when we know that we are not alone. The next morning, I reinforced my coat with a piece of cloth that I found in a corner and went back to the basement. I needed to try one more time. And it was there, among nails, pans, and old wood, that I saw a little box with an antenna, a radio. But the most surprising thing was not that. That's what I found next door, an old notebook with something written down by hand, a shot that Brandon never imagined I would see. And when I read, I knew he didn't just lock me in there. He planned everything. every detail, every step. Mm. Do you want to know what was written in that notebook? I'll show you, but I warn you, there's no turning back after that. I remember exactly the sound that the cell phone made when it lit up again. A little click, soft, but to me, it sounded like a cry for life. The battery went up slowly, 1%, then 2, then yeah. I was shaking so much that I almost dropped the device on the floor. No, his hands were cold, but his heart burned like embers. I didn't know what to write, or to whom. I didn't have much time, so I typed slowly, word for word. Im alive wa yet why. I stopped for a moment, looked at that sentence and felt a lump in my throat. It was so short, but it carried everything. The pain, sitigao, aunbeshartkaut, sibi, anger, godnam, cities, faith, fell, everything that still kept me standing. I sent it to Anne, my neighbor from Cedar Grove, who always took care of me when I got sick. And on an impulse that even I didn't understand, I also sent it to my son's house number. The fixed, the one I used to hear his voice when he still lived with me. The screen flashed. Message sent. Wow. The phone vibrated once again, and then it went out completely. Whoa. End of the battery. End of the force. End of everything. I tried to call again, but he died in my hands, cold as a body without a soul. His legs weakened. The ground seemed to rotate, and that's when everything went dark. When I woke up, when I didn't know if it was day or night. His head throbbed, and the light that came in through the cracks in the window seemed sharp. I stood there, lying on the wooden floor, trying to remember where I was, who I was, why I was alive. And then it came again, the sound of the wind outside, the basement souvenir. Wow, their message. Wow. I got up slowly. Oh, my back ached, and the torn blanket was wet with sweat and tears. I looked at the cell phone, turned off on the table, and I whispered, now he knows, far away, in some expensive hotel in Miami. My son must have looked at his phone and felt the blood disappear from his face. I know him. I know his look when guilt bites. He always tried to hide it, but the body gave it away. I bet Kimberly asked what it was, and he, pale, shibjammed, Tassidi, and the distant Shouchu, replied something like, Moon. Nothing? Just work. But she should have seen it. Why, she always saw it first. I imagined the scene. Brandon holding his phone. Wow. His eyes wide, and his mind trying to deny the impossible. How did she do it? Iron. He forgot the charger. He forgot the radio. She forgot that I was never an easy woman to erase. That message, short and dry, traveled miles. It entered through his device like a silent knife, because Brandon knows who I am. You know, I never scream. I register. That I never fight. I keep it. And that when I decide to speak, it's because I already have everything ready. Meanwhile, I so took your calm. Here, audience, the cold increased. Adi, my hands were numb, and the food was no more. I tried to warm myself by the fireplace, but the flames wouldn't catch. I spent the night awake, listening to the crackling of the wood. Why, Warren, she must have died separately. I thought of Anne. I wondered if she had read the message. One would have understood what those two words meant. I'll leave. Wow. Yet, deep down, I knew she was smart, that she wouldn't let that go. Maybe he had called the police. Maybe he would have gone to my house. Perhaps he was already on the move, looking for some clue. And while I nurtured that hope, back in Miami, Brandon was packing. How? He and Kimberly were arguing. She, nervously, and I, trying to control the situation. He, desperate, not knowing how to erase the past. They booked the first flight back to North Carolina because, deep down, he knew. I knew that this message was not just a cry for help. It was a warning. I sat back on the couch and hugged the pillow. My mind was mixed up with old memories. Little Brandon, calling me my warrior. Brandon, as a teenager, promising me a better life. Brandon, as an adult, locking me behind a door. Noise. The pain came in waves. But, along with it, something different began to be born. A kind of calm, no deep force. It wasn't anger. It was something bigger. It was lucidity. I knew that sooner or later he would come back. And when he returned, it wouldn't be to rescue me. It would be to erase the mistake. Only this time, I wouldn't be the victim. I would be the mirror. And when he looked at me, he would have to see everything he tried to hide. Everything that time has kept. But before that, I needed to prepare. Because the sound I heard outside on that cold morning was not the wind. When it was the engine of a car going up the road. And by instinct, I knew why. Nurse, he was coming. The sound of the engine approaching cut through the morning air like a razor. I was sitting on the floor near the generator, still smelling the smell of burnt oil and hope. I knew it was him. I knew before I even saw it. Brandon had returned, not because he cared, not out of regret, but because he understood, too late, that I was not a disposable piece. I was a living memory, and worse, a memory that speaks. The car stopped outside. I heard the doors slamming. 2 pairs of steps, one more hurried, the other firmer. Kimberly and Brandon. She spoke softly, but her tone was razor sharp. You should have thought of that before. Brandon, if she told anyone, we're done? He did not answer. He opened the door in a hurry, not imagining what he would find. The couch, where he left me 3 days ago, was empty now. The torn blanket lying on the floor. The windows, now insurgent. Ada Sevolcavio thou, without the external locks. The bed made, not intact, but on the wooden floor, and a trail, and there's an isa, a hardadadiawa, mud footprints going all the way to the basement. The strong smell of burning fuel revealed that the generator had worked, and it worked well. Brandon went down the stairs of the basement as if entering a nightmare. He called for me, Mom, Nancy, but only the echo answered, by day, no light, no presence, only the thick silence of those who wait. And there, in the corner of the dirt floor, a note scrawled in my handwriting. Never underestimate a mother's silence. Kimberly picked up the paper with trembling hands. She escaped, he said, aye, as if confirming a sentence. Brandon turned pale. His eyes swept the room. Now, trying to understand what I had done, where I was, what I could have said, whom, but he would not have the answer at that moment, because, for the first time, he was the one in the dark, and I was no longer the helpless woman he tried to hide from the world. No, when we survive our own rejection, something changes inside. The pain does not go away, but it transforms in force, lie down, calm, in focus, in faith. Heal me. I didn't know what was going to happen from then on. Lisha, Newdon City of Shio, Widowishtabasa. But I knew that, at that moment, he was feeling exactly what I felt. Abandonment. If this piece of my life can become a mirror or a hug for someone, will it help me to carry it forward? Like and subscribe here to the channel. It makes more difference than you think. Sometimes, everything a story needs to make sense. Is someone willing to listen? Brandon was still standing in the basement, staring at the note as if he could reverse time. But he couldn't. The silence he ignored for years, now he was screaming back. And what he didn't know, why, it's just that I wasn't far away. I was much closer than he imagined, and with something in his hands that could change everything. When I set foot back in Cedar Grove, on a tiny hill, the ground felt firmer. The sun rose shy among the trees on the street, and the air smelled of wet earth. Anne greeted me at the back door with teary eyes. I didn't say anything at first. He only hugged me, someone holding a life before it slips through his fingers. I was weak, dehydrated, but my mind, she was more alive than ever. We entered in silence. The kitchen still had the embroidered dishcloth hanging, the old radio at the same low volume. My home, 40 years of brick upon brick, paid for with sweat from cleaning and sewing nights. I sat slowly in the chair by the window and let my body rest. Anne brought sugar water, then hot soup. She looked at me with fear, with anger, wow, with that indignant love that only a true neighbor knows how to give. Juan, you need to go to the police, she said firmly. Well, after hearing everything, this is a crime. Nancy, he left you for dead. I took a deep breath. Not yet. Anne, they wouldn't understand. Not in the way I need them to understand. She frowned. but respected it. Ah, I knew that I was never a woman to act on impulse. I've always been the type to harvest, keep, and only then plant what needs to be born. When she left, I was alone in the living room, looking at the old photos hanging on the wall. Brandon, as a child, on his knees at Christmas, holding the gift I bought with borrowed money. Me in an apron, next to my husband in the backyard. Oh, you day. Before the cancer took half of me away, everything there had a story. Every wrinkle on the sofa, every stain on the floor, washed up down. And now, that same place would be my court. I took an old notebook from the drawer, near the hardcover one, where I wrote down the month's bills, the medicines, the forgotten birthdays. I passed the pen over the first blank sheet and began to write. It wasn't anger that moved me. Wow. It was justice. I wrote down everything I heard in the last few weeks. Kimberly's quote in Cracker Barrel, "Your house smells like old stuff." Brandon's look on the day of the dinner that he didn't show up. The lie of the hut for rest. The key clicking on the outside. Word for word. Date by date. My heart ached, but my hand did not tremble, because at that moment I was no longer just the betrayed mother. I was the witness to a story that no one else knew how to tell. And, you know, Tom, if you've come this far with me, you may be thinking, she should forget, let it go, forgive. But we can only forgive what has been recognized. And nothing was. That's why I wrote. Because when a woman like me is silenced, memory becomes the most dangerous weapon that exists. And, when? Stay with me, because what I discovered after writing the last page changes everything. Everything. You can't imagine what was hidden inside my own house. 2 days had passed since my return, and I had already managed to sleep a full night for the first time. My body was still weak, but my soul was steadfast and came every day. Wound. Brought soup. No. Asked if I wanted her to call her daughter a lawyer. And I said, calm down. Oh, not yet. She understood. On the morning of the second day, I heard Brandon's car parking. I recognized the noise of the engine before I even peeked through the curtain. It was the same noise as when he came home from school and ran to tell me that he had gotten an A in math. But this time, there was no rush in the steps. There was calculation. He showed up with a bouquet of cheap flowers, the kind that wither on the same day, and a rehearsed, embarrassed smile, the kind of smile that those who lie need to train in the mirror. Mom, I came here because, what happened was a misunderstanding. I just wanted you to rest. That cabin, it was supposed to be a retreat. You know? I didn't respond right away. I asked him to come in. The kitchen was clean, and the teapot was already boiling. I prepared tea and put on the table the corn fritters I made when he was little. The same gesture as always. But now, I wasn't the same. I sat calmly. Aboyan Tabayo. I folded my hands on my lap and let him talk. He tried to choose his words, stumbled. The key has jammed. Mom, it wasn't supposed to lock up like that. I swear. Each excuse was like a piece in a game he thought he was still winning. Minutes later, what do you? Kimberly came on. Well, she made a surprised face when she saw me. As if she was genuinely worried. Nancy, my God, you are back. What a scare it gave us. We were desperate, Mom. She approached and touched my shoulder with her fingertips, as if it were staging. I smiled. Oh, Lisiana, I'd some sector. A short smile, and said only, am still recovering from the enforced rest, Madame. She laughed, embarrassed. The table was set. Tea was served, and there, found, under the crochet towel, a small tape recorder turned on, recorded every word, every gesture, every hesitation. Are you already better off the heat in Miami? I asked, as if just starting a conversation. Brandon choked on the tea. Kimberly looked at him quickly, but he disguised it. I kept smiling. The same mother, as always. The same woman who made cakes and called to find out if her son was okay. But inside me, the tables had turned. Well, no, not. It's curious how some memories never fade. They stay there, bound, stored in a corner of the soul, waiting for the right moment to reappear. Sometimes it's a smell, a phrase, a silence, and suddenly, everything comes back. Do you also have memories like that? The kind that seem small, but that stay alive inside us as if they happened yesterday. If you've ever been through something similar, or know someone who has, share it with me in the comments. I want to read you. Sometimes writing also heals. Brandon kept talking. He said that he was already seeing a doctor to take care of the stress. That Kimberly was pregnant. A lie. Of course. And that's why he was distant. Kimberly lowered her eyes. She knew I knew. But pride did not let him retreat. The afternoon fell slowly. The tea cooled. The flowers withered. They said goodbye with icy hugs. Anything. Mom, call us. He said, how? This is Sapo. You can leave it. Dear, I replied, no, already with my hand on the doorknob. Nah. They left, and I went back to the living room, turned off the recorder and took a deep breath. The house was silent again, but now, a different silence, a silence of mine. And it was then that I remembered something he left here. Years ago. How? And that, maybe, was the key to everything I needed to finish this story my way. Do you want to know what it was? So, get ready, because even I was surprised when I found it. Brandon always thought he knew me, that it was enough to bring me a flower, a crooked smile, and I melted like butter in the pan. But the days passed, and he began to realize that something in me had changed. I no longer asked how he was. He didn't talk about longing. I didn't even mention the cabin. I just watched, with the eyes of someone who has already seen the bottom of the well, and came back from there with something in his hands. Kimberly told him not to worry. It's just a resentful old woman. In a week's time, he will forget everything. He will call back every Sunday as before. But he knew, deep down, Brandon was always afraid of my silence. Because, since he was little, he knew that when I kept quiet, it was because I was taking notes. And that's what I did. Oh, I started to put it all together. Old papers, messages he sent me with lame excuses, print of transfers I made to help them with overdue bills, trips, even the trousseau of the first baby that never came. I went to the old closet in my room and took the blue box where I kept important documents. Inside, along with my husband's funeral papers, I found the copy of the first will I made in the 90s. In it, he left everything to Brandon. Natural, until at that time, I only had him. How? But now, now I knew that justice is not just revenge. It is correction. It's balance. And in that paper, there was a mistake that I allowed to live for too long. I picked up the phone with steady hands and dialed Mr. Peterson's number. An elderly lawyer. Nana Wojcichin. Khan, like me, who had been taking care of our family affairs for decades. Good afternoon, Mr. Mizion Peterson. This is Nancy Thomas. Oh, the Undersecretary. I would Madam Secretary. Ah, my dear, how good to hear your voice. How are you? It's been a while. I know. Well, not just down. I'm doing well now. Thank you. I need to schedule a review of my will as soon as possible. He was silent for a moment. Of course. Of course. Any specific urgency? I just want to correct what was wrong. The tone of my voice seemed to make him uncomfortable. We scheduled it for the next day. I went back to writing in my notebook, not as someone who writes outbursts, but as someone who builds a timeline, a line that, sooner or later, someone would read. And it was that same night, while I was sipping my chamomile tea on the porch, that Brandon received the envelope. He stopped his car in front of my house and walked to the mailbox with his head down. I saw him through the crack in the curtain, but he didn't see me. Inside the brown envelope, there were 3 photos, one of them opening the door of the cabin, one of Kimberly laughing as she put her suitcase in the car, and another of the 2 on the balcony of the same cabin. And I'm sorry here, toasting with wine. The photos were taken from afar, with a good lens, sharp, 110, and it doesn't charm, undeniable. There was no ticket, just a sheet of notebook folded in half with 2 letters at the bottom. N.T. Brandon looked around. He got in the car and accelerated. That night, he didn't sleep. I know this because Anne called me in the morning, saying that he was asking for me in the city. He said he looked scared. How did I? More than angry. No, I didn't want to scare them. I wanted him to feel it, because there are pains that only understood when they return. And I was just giving back, in small doses, everything he gave me. But what he didn't know yet is that the strongest was yet to come. Can you imagine what happens when a betrayed mother finds out what she's really worth? Because I found out, and that's when everything changed. Brandon entered the room like a hurricane, holding the photos in his hands, his face red with anger and disbelief. "Are you threatening me?" he shouted. "No," each syllable filled with fury and fear at the same time. I continued to sit in my old armchair, sewing calmly, eyes as if nothing could shake me. "Threatening? Son, I only recorded what I experienced. I just wrote the truth. And the truth, you will see, always finds a way." Kimberly tried to intervene with that sweet tone she used when she wanted to manipulate. "Nancy, holy macao. Honey, it doesn't have to be this way." But I faced it for the first time with absolute firmness, without fear, without doubt. "You destroyed what was good in him, every bit of love he had for me. You have turned it into coldness, into contempt." The silence fell like a wall between us. Brandon, confused, pressed the photos to his chest, his fingers trembling. He took a deep breath, trying to regain control, but I saw in his eyes that fear was taking place where there was arrogance before. "I want to see the will," he said. His voice now low, almost a whisper, begging for certainties he didn't have. I got up slowly, walked to the drawer where I kept the documents and placed the old will on the table, right in the center, as if presenting a sacred relic. "It's all here. Yes, you can read it. Son, you can see it with your own eyes." Brandon picked up the paper, flipped through it carefully, and gradually his expression began to change. First came shock, then disbelief, and finally anger disguised as impotence. He stopped at the final page, where his name no longer appeared as an heir. His body became rigid. "You can't do that," he shouted. "No," his voice trembling with a mixture of fury and despair. "Yes, I can," I replied, with a calmness that seemed to cross every word, every line of my voice. "Just as you could lock me in that hut, alone, lies, without food, without water, leaving me for dead as I left for Miami, as if nothing had happened." His gaze faltered. Brandon realized that the force he believed he controlled was no longer within his reach. The silence that followed was devastating. I didn't scream. I didn't hit the table. No, I didn't make dramatic gestures. I just sat there, breathing slowly, staring at him. It was my silence that destroyed him inside, much more than any angry words I could have said. Kimberly stepped forward. But my steady gaze made her retreat. She realized, in that instant, that her influence on him had been underestimated. The woman she thought was fragile, who she thought she could manipulate, was whole, stronger than it had ever been. Brandon let out a sigh. and heavy and angry, as if the world was collapsing on him. The photos in her hands trembled. The paper in the will seemed to weigh tons. He sat down. Nay, what can one of Tapidam? It's donated to. His body hunched, his eyes fixed on the table, trying to understand how it all happened so fast. How the woman he knew as a mother had turned into someone who no longer accepted abuse. You, you destroyed everything I thought I had, he muttered. No, more to himself than to me. I just nodded, with the serenity of someone who had finally found his truth. Son, how? I didn't destroy anything. I just made it clear that I will never again allow myself to be treated as if I didn't exist. I gave everything for you for 30 years, and you chose not to see it. Now, it's my turn to choose for myself. The air seemed heavy in the room. The silence was prolonged, but there was no hostility. There was pure tension. Oh, the kind that makes every muscle in the body tremble with anticipation. Brandon looked at Kimberly, hoping for support, but she looked away. No. For the first time, he was alone with his own actions and the consequences of them. So, that's it? He asked, finally breaking the silence. Are you going to leave me with nothing? I took a deep breath and responded with the same firmness that has permeated my every act over the past few days. It's not about leaving you with nothing, Brandon. It's about leaving you without the opportunity to treat me badly again. It is about justice. Simple as that. He swallowed. Oh, I could see the conflict in his eyes, the mixture of love that still remained. The guilt that was beginning to creep in, and the real fear that I finally had strength he never imagined. Kimberly tried to speak again, but I interrupted her with a simple gesture of her hand. Nothing you say changes that. You both completely underestimated the strength of a mother who has seen the worst, and who has learned to protect herself when Brandon fell into his chair, not knowing whether to laugh, cry, or blow himself up. But that position of vulnerability was necessary. He needed to feel. He needed to understand that nothing he had tried to control was going to work anymore. And then I said, quietly, almost like a secret that only he should hear, you thought you could shut me up, control me, make me disappear. But she underestimated the patience and memory of a mother. What's next? It will show you that silence can be crueler than any scream. He looked up at me, scared, confused, but curious, a glow of apprehension mixed with despair. I knew he was beginning to understand. Abandonment, and it was so okay to use. The war was not lost for me, and every piece was being put in the right place. And in that instant, as he stared at the will, the photos, and my serene expression, I realized that the time had finally come to turn the real page. What they didn't know yet is that the silent justice I was preparing would not be just a lesson. It would be a mirror, a reflection of everything they had done. And when that happened, nothing would be the same as before. Can you imagine what it's like to face someone you've loved all your life and show that now you're the one who controls the rules? Well, that's exactly what I was about to do. And the question that hung in the air was simple but heavy. Would they really understand what it was like to face the mother they betrayed? Brandon entered the room with a fury that seemed to devour everything around him. His eyes, once a reflection of confusion and guilt, were now burning with a pure and dangerous rage. Without warning, he grabbed my phone and threw it against the wall. The shrapnel echoed through the room like a silent but devastating thunder. Each fragment scattered on the ground seemed to symbolize the years of sacrifice and love I had given. Ignored and despised by him, I stood still, trembling but steady, watching as he breathed heavily, unable to control his own fury. Kimberly tried to intercede, reaching over to hold him. But it was useless. He was blinded with rage, as if the whole world had conspired against him at that moment. "You're going to regret messing with me?" shouted Brandon, his tone of voice mixing menace and despair, and each word cut through the air like invisible blades. I took a deep breath, remembering the decades of struggle, the sleepless nights, the silent tears I shed for every moment I thought her love and respect were warranted. I had never felt so small, so vulnerable. How now? But, paradoxically, that vulnerability gave me a clarity that I had never had. I knew at that moment that I could no longer depend on him for my own safety or dignity. When Brandon and Kimberly left the room, still amid insults and threats, the silence that fell over my house was almost comforting. I crouched down to pick up the pieces of the broken phone, feeling each cold shrapnel against my hands, and I realized that despite the material damage, something inside me remained intact. My will to survive, to turn pain into strength, to not allow cruelty to define my life. I took a deep breath, feeling an old determination rekindle, that flame that never goes out, even when we are pushed to the edge of despair. I slowly climbed to the room, each step carrying years of memory, struggle, and tested patience. Under the mattress, my other phone was waiting for me, intact, charged, ready to go. I picked up the device, feeling a mixture of relief and quiet power. I called Anne, my neighbor and longtime friend, and said only, "Oh, time to start." Her voice, full of concern and understanding, reassured me instantly. Why, no, Anne knew that. After all, I wasn't asking for help out of weakness. I was asking for support for what would be the beginning of my silent justice. While waiting for her response, I sat up on the bed, watching the pieces of the broken phone on the floor. Each fragment seemed to carry the weight of the past, years of sacrifice ignored, prepared dinners that were never appreciated, calls not answered, visits neglected. But at the same time, every bit reminded me that I still had choices, that after being betrayed, humiliated, now, and locked away as a disposable object, my voice could still be heard. There are things that we live and keep, but maybe by telling, we help another heart to breathe. Enjoy this video and subscribe. And let's make this story reach those who need it. This is not just my story, but the story of every mother who has given everything and been ignored, who has loved without limits and faced the contempt of those she should love back. Every word I type now on my cell phone, every message sent, is a way to give back dignity, to show that even in silence, there is strength. What Brandon didn't realize at that moment was that by breaking the phone, he had opened the last portal to his own ruin. I had observed his coldness, his lies, his ability to ignore my suffering, and his every action had provided me with the evidence I needed. He believed he had total control, but I was just waiting for the right moment to show him that control had always been with me, even when he thought he could decide my fate. Anne arrived quickly. Now, silent but firm, we began to review every detail, every recording I had secretly made, every document that proved his negligence and his contempt. I could feel the tension in the air, but unlike Brandon, I wasn't afraid. She was calm. Now her calm, meticulous and centered. No, each piece of evidence was a piece of the puzzle that would prove the truth, that he was no longer the son I had so lovingly raised, that Kimberly was not only an influential wife, but a manipulator who had contributed to my being treated as a disposable object. The silence of the room was broken only by the sound of clicks, files being reviewed, messages organized, and the masters, recordings put in order. Each test brought me closer to something I hadn't felt in years. Justice, not impulsive revenge, but calculated, dignified, hard, silent justice. And deep down, I knew that when Brandon and Kimberly found out that I had put it all together, surprise and fear would take the place of the arrogance they had always displayed. As I sat there, reflecting on events, I felt a surge of clarity. Everything they had tried to control, my life, my choices, my dignity had failed. I had found a way to transform imposed weakness into strength of my own. And that broken phone, which for Brandon symbolized power, for me symbolized the opening of a door he would never have imagined. The door to my ultimate freedom. Wow. And as Anne and I finalized the last details, I couldn't help but think about how life sometimes puts us in extreme situations to teach us something essential, that we must never allow anyone to take away our voice, to make us feel small, to turn us into hostages of its cruelty. Brandon's every act, Kimberly's every gesture, now, every prolonged silence. All of this would be recorded and transformed into an undeniable truth that no one could dispute. What was about to happen would forever change the dynamics of our relationship. They believed they had dominated me, but they didn't know they were about to witness the strength of a mother betrayed, underestimated, and ignored for decades. A planned silence, calculated, but devastating in its impact, that would remind them of every moment they belittled me. And in that instant, as I stared at the remains of the broken phone, I felt a strange mixture of peace and quiet excitement. The battle was about to begin. Why? But this time, I wasn't the victim. I was the architect of my own righteousness, the guardian of truth they tried to erase, and the question echoing in my mind was clear. Do they really understand that the mother they underestimated was ready to completely change the game? That this time there would be no return? That their every misstep would be recorded and used to ensure that their injustice was exposed? Anne arrived early that morning. The sun had barely pierced the curtains when she knocked on my door, with that look of someone who knows that something big is about to happen. I sat with her at the kitchen table. The smell of freshly brewed coffee mixed with that of hope and nervousness. Are you sure, Nancy? She asked. No. Oh? Resting her hands on mine. More than ever. What are you? I replied. So nice, Zelda. They need to see what they did, and not with shouting, ew, nor with hatred, but with truth. I picked up the phone and called Mr. Peterson. Hi, he answered with the firm voice of someone who knows that something serious lies ahead. Nancy, no, am ready to go there. How? But are you sure you want to go through with it? I took a deep breath. I do, Peterson. And now, how? I just want to make sure that everything is done correctly. No more injustice will be signed with my name. While we waited for him to arrive, I called Mark Collins, the local journalist who had been writing about elder abuse and neglect for years. The first time I read a report by him, I remember thinking, Noah Chow, this man has courage. Now, it was him I needed. He listened to me in silence for long minutes and then said only, I'm going to help you. Mrs. Nancy, but we need to be discreet. If they smell what is happening, they flee before their time. How? Within 2 hours. Mark and a sound technician were in my office. They installed small, hidden cameras at strategic points. One behind the flower pot, another in the mirror frame, and one in the basement. One facing the stairs, the same basement where I almost lost my sanity. The system was simple but efficient. The cameras would start recording whenever they detected sound. No movement, no word would go unrecorded. While they worked, Anne watched everything, half scared, half proud. I never thought I'd see you doing something like this. Nancy, she said, smiling with that mixture of tenderness and admiration. Neither did I. I confessed. But sometimes you have to outsmart evil to prove that it exists. When they finished the installation, I sat down again with Mr. Peterson. He brought 2 portfolios. In one, I staggered by a lantern purity selqua. The true will, the one that left everything I built to a fund to support elderly women victims of neglect. In the other, the fake version, where Brandon appeared as the legitimate heir to everything. The 2 signatures would be identical, only the intentions changed. Peterson looked me in the eye with a quiet respect. You know this can cause a big upheaval, don't you? I know, but that's how truths are born. Peterson, with twists and turns, What they did to me was not forgetfulness. It was an attempt at erasure. And I'm not going to let my story end like that. He nodded, his eyes teary. You're a very strong woman, Nancy. Down. I smiled, but the smile didn't come easy. Strength comes when we have nowhere else to run. I didn't want to be strong. Well, nay. I just wish I had been loved with a little more care. The afternoon fell slowly, tinting the house with that end-of-day orange tone that always brought me a mixture of peace and melancholy. I walked to the bedroom, looked at the old photos on the dresser, and touched the cold glass of the frame with my fingertips. Here was the boy Brandon, in the school uniform, smiling, still pure, and there I was, with my hair tied in a bun, my face tired but full of love. I sat on the edge of the bed and closed my eyes. For a moment, I heard his laughter echoing through the house, the sound of footsteps running down the hallway, the words that once fed me. The words that once, Mom, I'll take care of you when you get old. Now, I've said, these memories are dangerous. They pull us back to the time we still believed in, but they are also the fuel that keeps us standing. You know, there are memories that hurt, but even so, we don't want to erase them, because they are the ones who remind us of who we were and who we still are inside. And that's why, if, as painful as it was, I knew the most memorable moment of my life was yet to come. At night, Anne slept on the sofa in the living room, insisting on staying with me. I went to the window, looked at the dark sky, and prayed softly. I didn't ask for revenge. I asked for strength not to tremble when the inevitable happened. Strength to look into the eyes of those who tried to erase me and show that I am still here, alive, lucid, whole. And before I went to bed, I walked into the living room and touched the flower pot on the table, feeling the small camera button hidden there. If they want the helpless old woman, I murmured, why, that's what they're going to get. Until the last act, and in the silence of the early morning, between the sound of the wind in the trees and the ticking of the clock on the wall, I knew that the time was coming. They would come. I can't. And when that happened, their every word, every gesture, down, every lie would finally be revealed, not by me, but by the very voices that once tried to silence me. The next morning, the sound of their car coming up the road was like the harbinger of a silent earthquake. I was in the kitchen, stirring the coffee, the same coffee I had prepared for so many years, waiting to hear his voice at the door. But that day was different. There was no love, no expectation. There was purpose. The smell of coffee rose through the house as a farewell. Anne had already left early, leaving everything ready. The cameras were on, the folders organized, and the laptop discreetly open on the basement table, waited for the right moment. Brandon and Kimberly walked in together, smiling, disguising their fear. Kimberly wore a perfume that was too sweet, one of those that try to cover the smell of guilt. Brandon spoke loudly, laughing for no reason, as if the sound of his own voice could ward off the discomfort. Mom, you look different. I'm happy to see you like this. What a delicious bow, he said, hugging me quickly. Superficially, I calmly returned the gesture. But, oh, the end, my son. Let so outside he too coptic concern. I was thinking in everything he went through. I think I let myself be carried away by emotion. I did what needed to be done. The will is already settled. Wow. He winked at Kimberly, and I saw, in that instant, Lisewa, relief trickle down his shoulders. I knew you would understand. Why, Mom, we only want the best for you. Kimberly nodded. What? Smiling. Montown. Of course. Now, they'd watch you. Nancy, man, that's what family is. We have a disagreement, but love always wins. Love. Ah, beautiful word. Empty in their mouths. I just smiled. Nothing now got you. Well, it's all here. Land's car. I placed the envelope with the false will on the table. They approached. Wow. And Brandon opened it in a hurry. His eyes ran along the lines, and his smile widened. Oh, finally all right. Kimberly leaned her head against his shoulder. Theatrically, one. So, now, Cone, he's so well. Night Hill. Now, we can plan things calmly. Brandon said, maybe sell the house. Buy something smaller for yourself. Might it also? Or, why shigena multipam a sabishadi. Who knows? Put it on rent? Wow. This house is too big, don't you think? Too big for those who don't want to live in it. I replied, no, I don't casino chigapakala. Sweetly, well, Dankantagora, what did test what he wound. He didn't notice the iron tip hidden in the sentence. He put the paper in his coat pocket, confident, no, and I knew that this would be the last act of the farce. Before you go, when did you come? I said, lie, adjusting the collar of my sweater. Had Kansin, Orlean, oh, there's one thing I want to show. I went to the basement and found some old memories of your father. Photographs, documents, what she wore at work. I thought you'd like to see it. Brandon hesitated. No town. Wow. For a moment. Wow. He looked at Kimberly, who looked annoyed. Now, Mom, we have a commitment. It's fast. I interrupted. And it's important. I walked down the stairs slowly, with the sound of their footsteps behind me. The air in the basement was cold, humid, but different from before. It was no longer a space for punishment. It was a court. When I turned on the light, I saw the two stop in the middle of the stairs. The walls were covered with everything I had gathered. Photos, copies of messages, receipts, transfers, and the pictures of the cabin, every detail of the abandonment. In the center, on the old wooden table. The laptop displayed a split screen. Mr. Peterson, the lawyer, Mark Collins, the journalist, and next to them, the county's social worker, Donna Hale. Brandon took a step back. What's that, Mom? She asked, trying to laugh. Kimberly, what? Said Mom. Hale, squeezed his arm. Now, this is crazy. No, my dear. I replied. Turning slowly. That's true. The silence that followed was almost palpable. Peterson spoke over the screen, his voice deep and steady. Good morning, Mr. Tom. Brandon Thomas. We are all hearing and seeing. Mrs. Hal Noyam Takaliwasa. Nancy authorized us to record this conversation on video. Brandon ran over to the laptop and tried to close the lid, but the image continued. It's all broadcast. Brandon, Mark said on the other end. Live. You couldn't do that. Mom, he shouted. No, you don't have the right. I don't need your forgiveness or your understanding, I replied serenely. Hal, these are the people who will decide your future, not me. Kimberly approached, her voice trembling. Nancy, please. We made a mistake, okay? It was a moment of despair. A moment of despair doesn't last 3 days. Without water and without food. I retorted, no. A moment of despair is not accompanied by a vacation in Miami. Brandon rubbed his head, pacing back and forth. Despair, the real one, I guess, was beginning to be born in him. You're going to regret doing this, Mom. He will destroy his own family. I took a step forward, now, eyes fixed on his. No, Brandon, I'm saving the little that's left of it. Kimberly began to cry. A rehearsed, tearless cry. Loud. Brandon, even more lost. I'd bow, was to try. Looked around. Neon-light touch trying to find a way out. But there wasn't. Every wall in that room was a mirror of what they had done. The laptop recorded everything. The hidden cameras, too. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something different inside my chest. Not hatred, not revenge, but peace. Because at that moment, power had changed hands. Brandon noticed. His face was empty. His gaze distant. He finally understood that a mother's silence is the most dangerous sound there is. The wind outside hit the window. No, and the noise brought back a memory of the cabin, the cold, the fear, the metallic taste of loneliness. But now it was different. I was no longer the woman in prison. He was the one who had the key. And as they tried to justify the unjustifiable, Mark's phone vibrated. He looked at the screen and smiled. What's Nancy? The sheriff is on his way. Brandon's gaze froze. He opened his mouth, but found no words. I stared at him calmly and said only, "Wow, the time for explanation is over. Oh, son, now is the time of truth." And in that second, I knew what was about to happen went far beyond justice. It was going to be liberation. But they still didn't know what I had saved for last. The last detail, which would really make everything change. The days that followed were like a distant echo of what I experienced. Only this time, the noise came from the outside world, not from inside me. The report came out on a cold Thursday morning. I was having coffee on the porch when I heard Annie's voice calling me from the kitchen. Newspaper in hand. Wow. Nancy left. The headline was big, impossible to ignore. When blood becomes poison, the Nancy Thomas case. Under the title, was an old photo of me taken at a church event, and just below, the summary of everything. The hut, the abandonment, Abandonment, our wonderful Sarah, the rescue, the video, Sarah, Monstoka, the evidence, my name, spread like a scar and a symbol. The whole city stopped to read. The neighbors who used to whisper in the pews now looked at me with a mixture of respect and amazement. Some knocked on my door with flowers, cakes, letters. Others just left notes at the gate. "You are courage. Thank you for speaking up for us. God protect you." I read everything calmly, with gratitude, but also with that silence of someone who no longer needs to prove anything. Meanwhile, outside, my son's world was falling apart. Brandon lost his job at the architecture firm where he worked. The news arrived quickly. Like everything in a small town, the project manager, once proud and confident, was now the man singled out in the news as the son who locked his own mother up for dead. No justification saved him. No apology drowned out the weight of the recorded truth. Kimberly, in turn, was removed from the hospital where she was a nursing coordinator. Moral misconduct. They said, social networks were full of comments. Some cruel, others indignant, many in solidarity with me. But in the end, everyone knew the mask had fallen. Brandon's friends are gone. His phone, previously full of invitations, was muted. The world, which had always applauded him, now viewed him with revulsion, and he, for the first time, tasted the bitter taste of exclusion, the same taste that he once made me swallow alone. The police opened an investigation. The video recorded in the basement was officially delivered. The evidence spoke for itself. The prosecutor's office classified it as psychological abuse and attempted confinement. It wasn't just a family affair. It was a wake-up call, an open wound that many people prefer to pretend doesn't exist. Anne and I watched the reports on television, always in silence. I didn't vibrate. I didn't celebrate. Justice, when it is real, does not need applause. It just needs to happen. And it happened, well, with the support of social services. My house was renovated. The basement, the same one that was the scene of my pain, and after my liberation, now had new light. Painted walls, flowery curtains. The space where Brandon tried to silence me became a small sewing studio. It was as if, brick by brick, I was rebuilding not only my house, but also myself. Brandon tried to look for me. At first, they were short messages full of guilt. No, Mom, forgive me. What am so damned Tom? Ersat, Risision. Then came the phone calls, which I didn't answer. Ah. Then he started to appear on the sidewalk, standing still. Wow. Looking out the window. There opened I this. I saw him, Calma, when I asked Doris, but I didn't leave. Not out of anger, by decision. They saw, when Archie, house they go, and said, Oh, has still your son, Nancy, man of a dear town, Modernta. And I answered, We Sikonartanam. I know, but sometimes love needs silence to teach. Press cameras began to camp out in the street. They wanted a statement. A statement. Oh, no, Nika. A tear for the headline. But I didn't give any of that. I remained serene, tending to the plants in the garden, serving tea to Anne, sewing dish towels. Now unto an life went on, simple, without a sound. I just take a banana. I'll taste it the way I always wanted it to be. One afternoon, I saw Brandon leave the police station on television. He was thinner, mown, his hair messy. On one night, his look lost. There was no hatred on that face, only the emptiness of someone who finally understood that forgiveness is not a right, it is a gift. And he still didn't deserve it. People commented, Nia. The neighbors whispered, Will she forgive? Ah, will she talk to him again? But forgiveness, for me, was something else. It was not forgetfulness. It was the end of the wait. And I, finally, was light. What destroyed him was not public humiliation, nor loss of work, nor cruel headlines. It was knowing that the mother he always thought would be on his knees. Now he walked with his head held high, and that little even with everything undone, she wouldn't look at him the same way. That night, before going to sleep, I went to the balcony and looked at the sky full of stars. I thought of my husband, the boy Brandon once was, the silence of the cabin, and the steady voice I found inside me. Everything seemed distant, and at the same time, alive. I still felt pain. Yes, the pain of having loved more than I should. The pain of having been forgotten. But with it, there was something new. Peace. And as the wind blew lightly through the trees, a feeling washed over me, as if something was yet to happen. Something I needed to see with my own eyes before time took me. Because sometimes true justice doesn't end when the other falls. It only completes itself. when we find our own heart. And that night, with my heart quiet and my gaze fixed on the horizon, I knew Brandon would still come back to look for me. But next time, it wouldn't be to ask for forgiveness. It would be to confess something that would change everything. Autumn has arrived in Cedar Grove, bringing the sweet smell of fallen leaves and a beautiful silence, the likes of those that no longer weigh you down. Today, I wake up early, put the kettle on the fire, and stay there, leaning against the window. Watching the sun rise slowly behind the hills. The garden is covered in golden and reddish tones, and the air has that freshness that seems to clean everything inside. For the first time in 30 years, I feel no fear, no expectation. I feel peace. On the kitchen table, and the new phone vibrates. It's Mark, the journalist. His voice comes, excited, with an poor Nancy. Well, the foundation named after you has received new donations. It looks like the project will double in scope. Women from other states want to participate. I close my eyes for a moment and let my heart thank you in silence. That small gesture, become born of pain, now serves to help other women who once fell silent like me. Sometimes I think that perhaps this is the greatest victory, to transform what they tried to destroy into a shelter for those who still struggle. Brandon moved out. He went to a distant city, where he tries to start over away from the eyes that judge him. Kimberly also disappeared from the headlines and is said to have returned to her parents' house. And I wish harm on neither. The truth is, I learned that the harshest punishment doesn't come from the law. It comes from the conscience. Each one of us, one day, needs to sit in front of the mirror of our own soul. And when that moment comes, there's no way to lie. On the living room shelf, I still keep the old photo. Me, my husband, and little Brandon, smiling in the backyard, not as a memory of pain, but as a testimony of what survived. We learn that love is not extinguished. It only changes shape. I loved as a mother, suffered as a woman, and was reborn as someone who learned to listen to herself. Some children betray their mothers, but time always returns the truth. Today, I live peacefully. I sew dish towels for church, have coffee with Anne on cold afternoons, and write in a new notebook, no longer about the past, but about everything I still want to live. I learned that life, even late, can still be beautiful, and that dignity is something that no one can take away from us, not even when they try. Sometimes I think that telling this story was like opening the window after a long storm. There are things that we need to let the wind carry away so that the heart breathes again. And if you got this far with me, thank you. Thank you for listening to me, for sharing your time with me, for letting me into your home and your heart a little bit. If this story touched you, it leaves me a hug in the form of a like. It warms more than any blanket on these cold days. And if you want to come back for another coffee, subscribe here to the channel. So we go together. Exchanging memories and strength. right here in the comments of which city you listen to me. Now, look at that. I know the comments of which city you listen to me. I like to imagine this map full of voices, of stories that meet unhurriedly, as if the world were a big balcony. And don't forget to activate the bell so you don't miss it when the coffee's ironed again. Because each wrinkle tells a story, and each story carries a strength. And if I learned something from all this, it's that time doesn't erase. He reveals. Don't go away yet. Listen to the next real story that will appear on the screen. I'll wait for you there with another hot coffee and another vivid memory to tell. Always remember, each wrinkle tells a story, and each story carries a strength. Watch the next video here on the channel with another incredible story.